You've been lied to by every major war movie of the last 25 years. I'm talking about films built on fabrications so blatant that they'd be funny if millions of people didn't believe them. Rivalries that never happened, body counts that were just inflated by hundreds, and entire wars that were reframed just to justify instances that never occurred.
Chris Kyle lied about his medals earned.
Desmond Doss was never court-martialed, and Marcus Luttrell didn't fight 200 Taliban. Hollywood didn't make these movies to tell you what happened. They made them to make you feel good about something, even if it meant creating lies about real people. American Sniper was Clint Eastwood's 2014 blockbuster, which made $547 million worldwide, and turned Chris Kyle into a household name. Chris Kyle was a serial fabricator, and the movie knew it. Before we even get into the film inaccuracies, we need to establish something crucial. Chris Kyle wasn't just exaggerating here and there, he was making up entire events. He claimed he punched Jesse Ventura at a seal bar, and Ventura sued him for defamation and won $1.8 million.
And he says that he punched you out in
Well, there's
bar.
a chapter in his book.
Yes.
And he said that I said SEALs deserve to die. If I felt that way about my old unit, why would I be attending? There were 170 SEALs that wanted me kicked out of the UDT SEAL Association over his lie. There wasn't one witness that saw me get hit, and there wasn't one witness that heard me say anything he attributed to me.
Why the fuck would he choose you?
Because I had fame.
Because it never happened. Kyle claimed he shot 2 carjackers at a Texas gas station. No police report, no bodies, and absolutely no evidence. He claimed he killed 30 looters from the roof of a New Orleans Superdome after Hurricane Katrina. Again, no bodies, no evidence, nothing. And here's where things get really good. Chris Kyle lied about his own military decorations. He claimed 2 silver stars and 5 bronze stars, all from valor. Navy records showed he actually received 1 silver star and 3 bronze stars with valor. The Pentagon warned him before his book was published that his medal count was wrong. He published the false information anyway. So when Clint Eastwood decided to adapt Kyle's memoir, he was adapting a book written by a guy who couldn't stop lying about his own life. And instead of challenging that, the film just ran with it.
What do you think about Michael Moore and Bill Maher's criticism of American Sniper?
Well, they're right.
The movie's central conflict, Kyle's pursuit of an enemy sniper named Mustafa, is entirely fictional. In Kyle's memoir, Mustafa gets mentioned in exactly 1 paragraph, and Chris Kyle describes him as an Olympics marksman who was using his skills against Americans and Iraqi police, but explicitly states that he never encountered him. So the film invents an entire rivalry with multiple confrontations and a cinematic long-distance duel where Kyle makes an impossible shot from over a mile away. This shot, which completely didn't happen, immediately triggers a dramatic firefight, which also didn't happen.
I want to clear the air and confirm that the mile shot was military confirmed. However, it wasn't against Mustafa. It was against a random person who had an RPG aiming at a U.S. convoy. So, in theory, yes, the shot did happen, but how it was described in the movie was historically inaccurate to what actually happened. And Kyle even himself described the shot as a luck shot and wasn't based off skill. However, still really cool, but I'm discrediting it up against Mustafa because it wasn't.
The real Kyle believed Mustafa was killed by other US forces, not him. But the movie needed a villain, needed a final boss battle, and needed that hero moment. The weird thing about American Sniper is that it deliberately conflates 9/11 with the Iraq War. The film cuts directly from footage of the Twin Towers falling to scenes in Iraq, and Kyle explicitly states they're fighting the people who attacked America on 9/11. This is historically false. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. The film also never mentions Saddam Hussein, never mentions George Bush and weapons of mass destruction, or any actual reason for the Iraqi war beginning. Every Iraqi in the film, except military interpreters, is portrayed as an evil insurgent or collaborator. But perhaps the most disgusting thing the film does is involve Mark Lee, the first Navy SEAL killed in Iraq. The movie portrays Lee as a reluctant warrior questioning America's mission before being killed. His widow, Maya Elbaum, publicly condemned this portrayal. Nothing could be further from the truth, she said. The real Mark Lee was shot through the mouth and soldier while providing cover fire for his wounded teammate Ryan Job.
They were asking me, or even telling me, I didn't realize who Mark was. I didn't realize that he believed in these things. And the name Mark Lee, what was being represented, was just an inaccurate portrayal of who Mark really was.
What did the movie get wrong about Mark?
his whole character.
Lee died on August 2nd, 2006, holding off enemy fighters so Job could be evacuated. The film changes this to show Lee dying during a revenge mission, falsely portraying him as having doubts about the war. American Sniper literally took a dead hero's legacy and rewrote it to fit a narrative arc. If American Sniper's lies stemmed from adapting an unreliable narrator's memoir, Mel Gibson directing Hacksaw Ridge took one of the most genuinely heroic stories from World War II, a story that needed zero embellishment, and decided to make shit up anyways. Hacksaw Ridge tells the incredible true story of Desmond Doss, the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor. And Doss's actual heroism is staggering. He saved 75 men at Hacksaw Ridge without carrying a weapon. That is actually real. That happened. The army then tried to figure out how to bend the rules to give him the Medal of Honor because what he did seemed impossible. So naturally, Mel Gibson decided this story needed dramatic improvements, which actually just makes no fucking sense. It was a great movie to begin with, had a great story, everything could have formulated well, and the overall accomplishments could have been told so greatly if they just were told factually. But instead, Mel Gibson was like, hey, what if I just lie? One of the film's most dramatic sequences shows Doss being arrested and imprisoned and nearly court-martialed for refusing to carry a weapon. His father obtains a letter from a former commanding officer that saves Desmond at the last moment. Dramatic stuff, right? Well, none of it happened. The real Doss was never court-martialed and he was never imprisoned. While his officers did threaten him with Section 8 discharge for mental instability, no formal court-martial proceedings even occurred. The scene where his father intervenes with a letter is pure fiction. In reality, Desmond's father contacted a church official in Washington, not a military officer. The film also shows Doss missing his own wedding because he was denied leave and thrown in a holding cell. That also didn't happen. Desmond Doss and Dorothy Shuttle were married on August 17, 1942, before he went on active duty. They had originally planned Saturday night, but had changed it to Monday afternoon due to scheduling. At no point was Desmond prevented from attending his own wedding. The movie depicts young Desmond's father pulling a gun on his wife and shooting at the ceiling. In reality, the father pulled a gun on his wife's brother during an argument about drinking. Desmond's mother intervened, the police took the father away, but the film changes this to make it more dramatic and center it on the parents rather than the uncle because the uncle isn't in the story of Desmond Doss, it's about Desmond Doss's childhood. The movie also shows Desmond meeting Dorothy at a hospital with her working as a nurse. But in actuality, Desmond met Dorothy at church in Lynchburg, Virginia, where she was selling Adventist books. That one is so funny to me just because look at all the things that Mel Gibson has already made up and he can't even be like, how about if we tell them where they met? Instead, no, we gotta make this story of him being a medic really flow correctly. So what if he met the girl of his dreams at a hospital? Dorothy didn't become a nurse until after the war, with Desmond's injuries preventing him from working full time. So in actuality, the nurse thing became the thing of love, but in actuality, it was the foregoing of love after the war and injuries, and he couldn't support himself. So it's like true, but Mel Gibson was just like, what if I rearranged it, all of it, just to make a better story? The film depicts Doss bandaging Japanese soldiers and lowering wounded enemy combatants down a cliff. While there was evidence of an American bandage found on a Japanese soldier, there was no actual evidence that Doss provided medical aid to enemy forces. This appears to have been added to emphasize his commitment to saving lives, even though what he already did was incredible enough. But what I don't understand is Mel Gibson leaving out some of Doss's actual heroic moments because he thought audiences wouldn't believe them. After saving 75 men, Doss was later shot by a sniper, shattering his arm. He was left alone for 5 hours before crawling 300 yards to safety with a wounded arm. While being carried on a stretcher, he saw another wounded man and rolled off the stretcher and insisted the other soldier be carried instead. He then crawled back to camp himself while treating other wounded soldiers along the way. This moment actually happened, and Mel Gibson thought, oh, it's too unbelievable, I won't include it. But instead, I'm just gonna make a bunch of bullshit up throughout the entire movie that people would believe more, but none of it happened, and the true heroic moment that the soldier did will be just kept out. What? Both American Sniper and Hacksaw Ridge invented drama around real heroism. But Lone Survivor did something completely different. It took a tragedy where the details were already disputed and decided to go the most dramatic, least accurate version possible, and somehow it's one of the most successful war movies today. Lone Survivor depicts Operation Red Wings, a 2005 mission in Afghanistan where Marcus Luttrell and 3 teammates were ambushed. The film captures real tragedy. 3 SEALs died along with 16 servicemen on a rescue helicopter. But the numbers don't add up. The movie's most glaring problem is the enemy force's size. The film shows what appears to be a massive Taliban army, but Marcus Luttrell's own accounts keep changing. In his original after-action report immediately following the mission, he stated 20 to 35 insurgents attacked them. In his book, the number grew to over 200. The Medal of Honor citation for Lieutenant Murphy describes more than 50 enemy fighters, and the official Navy citation says anywhere between 30 and 40. Former Marine Colonel Andrew McManus, who helped plan Operation Red Wings and assisted recovering bodies, stated that there were no known enemy casualties from the Taliban side. One analysis concluded that there weren't 35 enemy fighters in all of the Korangal Valley that day. Another interesting detail is Luttrell was found with 11 full magazines of ammunition, the exact amount he brought on the mission. So how much fighting actually occurred?
What a lot of people need to understand is that it is historically accurate that there was anywhere from 25 to 30 people fighting in that ambush. Luttrell's inflation of it could be for multiple reasons, such as time passing, such as PTSD, and such as a bunch of other things that could conglomerate the story into something different. However, the problem here is that Hollywood decided to take that 200 number and not take any of the 25 and 30 numbers, which were more historically accurate, and decided to use the 200 number because it would have looked better on screen. So to point out, this is not a disavow of Marcus Luttrell's work, but really a really harsh critic towards Hollywood for taking a number that likely wasn't historically accurate to fit a better narrative about what made something look cooler, when in actuality, even if it was 25, 35, 50, or 200, it was still an incredible ambush that they persevered and survived.
The film's moral centerpiece was the debate over whether to kill or release the goat herders that discovered the team. It's portrayed as an agonizing decision throughout the beginning of the film. Matthew Axelson argues that they should be killed. Michael Murphy decides to release them. But the entire premise may be a little flawed, because according to some accounts, the Taliban had already found the Americans before the goat herders had appeared. Villagers reported hearing from the Taliban that they'd been listening to Americans discuss the goat herders' fate, meaning the Taliban were already tracking them. If true, the SEALs were dead the minute they let go of the rope. The film also doesn't address why they didn't simply tie up the goat herders and relocate. They had flex cuffs available. This option is barely mentioned also. The movie claims Ahmed Shah had killed 20 Marines in the week before Operation Red Wings. This is entirely false.
According to casualty records, on June 3rd, 2005, Shah's forces has ambushed and killed 3 Marines in the process. So to make the claim that he killed 20 people before this is historically inaccurate.
The film also shows a cinematic sequence in the village of Kandish fending off a massive Taliban attack and Gulab being shot and his house being destroyed by an RPG before American planes arrive. Are you shocked to hear this? None of this happened. Gulab's house wasn't even destroyed, and the Taliban didn't fire shots into the village. There was no massive final battle like it was depicted in the film. The Taliban couldn't attack because doing so would have lost them local support. As Luttrell writes in his memoir, they wanted me, but they would never kill another 100 Afghan people, including women and children, in order to get me. Ahmed Shah found Luttrell and Gulab, but didn't attack because the presence of Gulab made it a complete standoff. The film turned a small, tragic ambush into an epic hours-long battle against hundreds of fighters.
What I can fully gather from Lone Survivor is that Marcus Luttrell didn't actually write the book, as I'll show in clips ahead.
I just got out of the hospital and I was doing physical therapy at the team, and they called me up and they said, hey, we're going to declassify part of this operation and we're going to put it out into a book. I was privileged enough to have the best lawyers, the best writers. Like, I interviewed with everybody.
It essentially was, he was debriefed after, and so then he sat with a writer, like most people do, when he is officially debriefed from the Navy, talking about, oh yeah, we were ambushed by 30, 35 people, to then sitting in a room, likely saying something like, oh, it felt like 200 people. That person then writes down, oh, it was 200 people, misconstruing what actually happened. That's why I think all the numbers get jumbled, because there are so many different avenues. It wasn't just Marcus writing the book. Also, the fact that Marcus didn't know the book came out.
Sitting at the chow hall in Ramadi, one of the guys in my platoon goes, hey man, there's a book out about your story.
A person who actually lived through these things wasn't even debriefed on when it was actually going to get released. What I can say for certain is this story in its entirety has a lot of holes in it that are not being answered.
Are we noticing a pattern right now? These films all follow the same playbook. Invent dramatic conflicts, court-martials, enemy rivalries, moral dilemmas that just never occurred. Change how people died to fit narrative arcs, and most importantly, strip away any political or historical context that might complicate the simple story of American heroism. But these 3 films are just the beginning. Let's look at how this pattern extends across decades of war films. Pearl Harbor is so historically inaccurate that one historian said the only correct thing in the movie is that there was a US naval base in Hawaii. The film shows nuclear-powered submarines in 1941, years before nuclear power was even invented. There are 1950s Jeeps and speedboats throughout as well. Black Hawk Down erases crucial context about why Somalians hated Americans, never mentioning about the Bloody Monday raid where the UN killed up to 70 people. It downplays or ignores Pakistani and Malaysian soldiers who provided tanks and armor that saved American lives. Saving Private Ryan, despite its reputation for realism, shows American soldiers sinking underwater and being shot by German bullets. This is physically impossible. Bullets lose all momentum when they hit the water. Zero Dark 30 was condemned by the Senate Intelligence Committee as grossly inaccurate for suggesting torture led to useful intelligence. Senator John McCain explicitly stated no useful information was the product of this torture. And CIA Acting Director Michael Morrell issued a statement. The film creates the strong impression that enhanced the interrogation techniques that were used in the key to finding bin Laden. That impression is false. This last one is more of a historical inaccuracy of something that would never happen and not a literal true story that they just got wrong. 1971's entire premise, sending two average soldiers on a dangerous journey to deliver a message, would just never happen. Military historians argued such a huge mission was too far dangerous just for regular runners. And the film depicts the German withdrawal as a trap, but Operation Alberich was actually a strategic shortening of German lines, not an ambush. The timeline is wrong, the equipment is obsolete, and the geography makes no tactical sense. So with all this being said, why do directors keep doing this? Why take incredible true stories and make them worse by lying? Part of it is the structure of Hollywood storytelling. Films need clear things to actually create said story. You need a villain, you need moral dilemma, you need dramatic climaxes, and obviously a resolution. Reality doesn't always provide these in a neat 120-minute package that you can put out in theaters. So Hollywood will manipulate a story slightly or sometimes very heavily to fit a narrative of a story that matches what it means to make a Hollywood movie about war. Does it mean that it's going to be historically accurate? No. Does it mean the film will be better for people who don't need to understand the entire concept of war and make a movie that people will watch for generations? Sure. But there is something deeper happening when these films continue to get put out. The films aren't just telling stories, they're creating mythology that some people actually believe. Now, this is no disrespect on these stories as a whole, because these stories without the Hollywood fabrication are genuinely insane stories that should live in history forever as the great works of people who served our country. And I'm not trying to take away or disrespect any of that. But it's unfair when things get systematically removed to fit a Hollywood narrative, such as political context, inflated numbers, and things that just flat out didn't happen. And here's the worst thing about a lot of these films. This is how millions of people understand recent American military history. Hollywood has decided that the truth is less important than drama, that accuracy is less valuable than an emotional impact, that real people's legacies can be made to fit a 3-act structure.